Hi, this is Greg Kilstrom. Welcome to the Agile World podcast, where we discuss customer experience, employee experience, and transformation in an agile age. The Agile World podcast is brought to you by TEKsystems, an industry leader in full-stack technology services, talent services, and real-world application. For more information, go to teksystems.com. To read more about the topics discussed on this show, you can go to my website at theagile.world and read my latest articles or get a copy of my latest book, The Center of Experience, a blueprint for creating an experience-led organization, now available on Amazon and other retailers. My name is Greg Kilstrom, and I'm the host of the Agile World podcast. Today we're going to talk about company culture and how to maintain and develop great employee experience in a fast-growth global organization. We're also going to talk about how to develop and train the best and most effective types of leaders for your organization. To help me discuss this topic, I'd like to welcome Joy Sybesma, Chief People Officer at Dataiku. First, why don't you tell me a little bit about your experience as Chief People Officer and what you do at Dataiku?
Great. Thanks, Greg. Yes. So I've been the Chief People Officer at Dataiku for the past 6 months. And in this role, on paper, I oversee all of human resources, talent acquisition, learning and development, the office management experience, as well as the total rewards function, which is compensation benefits globally. And in this role, it's a global role. So I have team members based in Europe as well as in the United States and soon to be in Singapore. And it's been a really interesting 6 months where I have learned so much, and I can't wait to talk about it.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, it sounds like things are really are moving fast and a lot of growth there. So let's talk about that and how to maintain great company culture despite this startup growth. So first, why don't you define what success with culture looks like? What is a successful company culture at Dataiku, and what does it look like to both current and potential employees?
Yeah, well, I think what's really unique at Dataiku is I am fortunate enough to join a company where the culture was already strong. And I think there's a few indicators of that. Our Glassdoor reviews, when I was even interviewing myself, I thought they must be fake because we have 100% approval rating of our CEO. And even just as you read through the reviews, I realized there's something really unique and special about this company. And quickly realized in the interview process that they were doing it without a chief people officer. And so, well, in a way that was quite intimidating of why do they even need me? They've already been so successful at doing so many of the things that, inherently would be part of my role. And what I realized is part of my role coming in was how to really deeply understand what is working and how to preserve that and scale it. And so a successful company culture, to me, it starts with having leaders that embody the values that they hire for and promote within the organization. The fundamental thing I think that I can't impact is I have to have a CEO and a leadership team that are inherently good human beings and who lead with empathy. And so I really do think that the culture starts at the top in that way, and you can't really change the top oftentimes. So for me, it was understanding like what is Dataiku and who are we as an organization, and then how do we take what's worked in building that and continue to change the way we potentially operate or manifest it so that it can scale.
Yeah. So, I mean, you mentioned the great Glassdoor ratings, and I mean, that is definitely to be commended. 100% approval. That's great. So, yeah, let's talk a little bit more about that. What does it actually mean to scale? So, in other words, is it doing more of the same? Is it doing the same thing but to more times, or what does that actually look like? How do you look at scaling? Because I would imagine there's some things that you can't simply do more of, right?
Right. Well, I think it's interesting because a piece of it is it's actually doing things very differently to achieve the same result. So
Yeah.
I'll give an example. I think that Dataiku is similar to other companies that are at this size and scale and trajectory, in that up until this point, or up until recently, we made a lot of decisions based on individuals. So, we want to hire this person for this role. It's the first time we've hired a person in this role. So we're going to, pay them and make decisions around their job and their title really based on them. Then all of a sudden you have, 5 people with that same role. And where I think culture can kind of fall apart is thinking too much about the individual and realizing that actually, the downside of that can end up looking like favoritism, or can end up looking inequitable. And
Yeah.
so building process to ensure consistency and fairness can actually preserve a culture of having great human beings who are really smart and capable, but with more clarity around what we expect from roles like that, and how we compensate for roles like that.
Yeah, wow, that's a great insight. What teams do you work with to make this happen? So I would imagine it's not just the HR department that is part of making great EX at Dataiku. Where's the biggest opportunities, as well as where are you finding success working across the organization to achieve good employee experience and culture?
Yeah, I mean, especially I think at this company, because HR was really an administrative function here. So, whereas in some organizations, HR is really seen as business partners. I've had to do a lot of education and evangelism and just, influence. And doing that by building relationships and having results,
Yeah.
because I couldn't just come in and say, I'm a chief people officer and here's my resume and here are all the things I can do for you. It's a data driven organization, and kind of a no bullshit type of organization.
Right. Right. I think you
So,
can say that.
yeah,
Yeah,
thank you. Good.
that's
And so a part of that is I refer to my role as being the pit orchestra conductor of a Broadway show. So nobody can see me, but I'm kind of orchestrating the whole performance. And so I think influence is really important, and there's nothing that HR does alone in terms of shaping the culture. Our role is to really build programs and processes to scale the culture and enable leaders to successfully support it.
And another thing that I think is you share with a lot of other enterprise chief people officers is this idea of maintaining a great culture in a company with offices all over the globe, right? So,
Yeah.
with employees in, I believe, 15 countries around the world, what are some of the challenges that poses in delivering this great culture and experience?
Yeah. It's one of the reasons I took this job, because I think scaling culture is one challenge in and of itself. Scaling culture globally, I had
Mm.
no idea how to do it, but I was super excited about the challenge.
Yeah.
And I think it manifests in many ways. But there's time zone challenges, there's cultural differences, there's language barriers, and then you have then by nature the uniquenesses of human beings as well as uniquenesses of roles. So there's just so many deviations that make inherently running a business and collaborating more complicated and more challenging. What's
Yeah.
incredible about it is the diversity of experiences and the ability to really create something unique. But the way it's coming to life for me, I'll tell a really personal example. So
Mm.
I have a global team. I've had global teams of my own before, but I'm realizing that I really haven't adapted my leadership style as much as I've had to at Dataiku.
Yeah.
So an example of that is, sometimes the people function can be a bit of the complaints department. So
Right.
we end up having to solve a lot of problems and help people with a lot of tough things, emotional things. And so when we come together as a people team, it's always been really important to me that it's our time to celebrate each other and to recognize each other. So
Yeah.
my team is pretty much 50-50 France and US. And so the first big team meeting I had, we're having a monthly team meeting. I sent around a note to everyone a couple days before, saying, here's the loose agenda for the meeting. Let me know if you have ideas of things you'd like to do differently. But one thing I want to do is recognition. So, if you can think about your colleagues and just come prepared with something that at least one of them has done that's really made a difference for you and impact, come and share it. I didn't get any feedback on that, right? So I was like, okay, this is going to work. So we get on the global Zoom call and I say, all right, I set the expectation. This is why we're here. I had sent around a note asking you to prepare some recognition. So, all right, who wants to go first? And it was like global silence and just people, blank face staring at me. I'm like, okay, where did I go wrong? Okay, nobody, I'm trying to like fill in the blanks. Like, what about you, Jill? Didn't somebody... Well, finally, a woman on my team in America speaks up and she says, Joy, I really want to recognize you for all the things that you've done to bring us together as a team. And I could see everyone in France roll their eyes. And I'm like, oh man, this is not what I had in mind. I didn't want this to be a forum to recognize me. So I said, all right, you know what, guys, I think that maybe we'll have to rethink how we're doing this. And maybe we just need some more time to like gel as a team and we'll come back to it. Well, after that meeting, I got an individual note from each member of my French team saying, Joy, that was completely inappropriate. We don't appreciate verbal public recognition. And it was like a total miss. Here are other ways that we could do it differently. But anyways, even just a simple example like that, I interpreted the silence, even before the meeting as buy-in.
Right.
And really, I should have spent more time. And I think that's a big learning I've had is the cultural differences. You really have to be an agile leader and you have to be able to check yourself with everything that you're doing to make sure that it's going to land the way that you've intended it to. So perception and intention come to my mind a lot. It doesn't even really matter what you're intending if you don't get people to perceive it that way. And so I'm finding as a global leader myself and also coaching the other leaders who have global teams is to just be wildly explicit and constantly ask for feedback or during and after any type of communication.
Yeah, I think that also speaks to employee experience. It doesn't have to be consistent everywhere in order to be great. I mean, it needs to be consistently good, but so yeah, I mean, I think that's a great example of that in practice, right?
And even something like we were facing an issue of people are starting to leave Dataiku. We've had amazing retention and we still do, but people get to certain points in their careers, they want to move on or things don't work out. And so in the US, I was having employees saying like, oh, wow, Joy, I didn't know that person left the organization. I just went into our HRS and looked at the org chart and they were gone.
Yeah.
We need to be better about communicating this, right? So I met with the exec team. We kind of strategized, different ways to communicate when people are leaving. We came up with was, obviously when people leave, if we can, we'll send a nice email about their contributions and where they're going. And usually there's a nice amount of time between when someone decides to go or we decide to part ways and when they actually leave. But people need to know, maybe less detail, but just that people are moving on, when their last day is, and who to contact, in the interim to continue to make sure that the work can get done. So I ended up sending an email with a lot of, build up of this is why we're doing this. You're going to get an email every week that shows, who's joining the company, who's leaving the company, who's maybe transitioning to a different role within the company.
Yeah.
And sent it out. And it was like an anthropology experiment. Immediately I had, thank you. This is exactly what we've been missing. It's so clear from the majority American. And deep anger from a lot of people on the European side because they felt like it wasn't human and there wasn't enough context. And it was actually a copied and pasted spreadsheet in the email. And because of even a simple thing as grid lines, they said, you're putting people into a spreadsheet.
Wow.
And so it really took a lot of iterations and getting feedback from people and from the team to finally come to a place of like, how do we communicate things that are important to communicate globally in a way that's digestible for everyone?
Yeah.
That, you know, that kind of solves that problem of pleasing people from, you know, not only cultural differences, but different amounts of tenure, where obviously earlier on employees who probably know the majority of the company have just much more of a family feel and feel like they deserve to understand why.
Yeah.
So where we landed from a process perspective is everybody goes onto our HRIS Bamboo to, you know, track their paid time off, to look at the org chart, and we have an announcements feature on there. So we have a nice non-spreadsheet form now that is a lovely teal, and
Nice, nice.
and it's kind of passive. It has all the same information, but it's not flooding people's inboxes. It's just there for people to go and check as they need to. And so even something like that, I think, has taken, you know, 2.5 months to get it right. But having the thoughtfulness and the humility to just know that the first attempt at something may fail, but to get as many points of view as you can to try to iterate it to make it right, I think is also a part of
Yeah.
managing a global culture, is that adaptability and the ability to just take the inputs and consistently use them to try to make it better.
Yeah, I mean that definitely, yeah, that speaks to the agility and all of that. So to switch gears a
Mhm.
little bit, let's talk about technology. So you're at a technology company. What role does technology play in this employee experience?
Oh my gosh. Well, it's hugely part of it. And you know, the coronavirus stuff is happening right now. And so
Right.
even right now, especially, we've just gone to a strongly recommending everyone globally to work from home or remotely for a period of
Yeah.
time. And we're lucky that because we're already distributed, we are very used to using technology for work. So it isn't, I mean, it's only day one, but it hasn't been largely disruptive to our workflow or our culture because it's ingrained in it. And I'll give you some examples.
Yeah.
Um, Slack, I'm sure most tech companies are using it, but the ability to use Slack to help foster and maintain your culture. Um, for example, we're doing question of the day on Slack
Nice.
now that we're fully distributed. So even just like a way to bring people together with, you know, a common question. We're doing virtual lunches on via Zoom. So we're used to having
Nice.
lunch in the office. Now we're doing like cross-functional group lunches where we just eat in Zoom together and feel that sense of community.
That's
Um,
great.
yeah, it's good. It's good. We'll see how it continues to go. Um, and then, you know, in other ways, technology, our actual product, Data Science Studio DSS, is a collaborative data science AI tool. And so, because of that, I think, you know, we're teaching our clients how to be collaborative and how to approach data collaboratively, and therefore, in the way that we work, it's largely collaborative too. So we probably use every fancy tool that's out there. The latest favorite is Airtable from a project management and visualization of your projects perspective.
Gotcha.
But we also, I mean, even as simple as Google Docs, we're using those. We don't even have Microsoft Excel even for our finance team.
Oh
So
wow.
we're all cloud based in really everything we use, which I think just lends itself to being, you know, asynchronous work, time zone agnostic, and still feel like you're moving the business forward and you're collaborating.
Well, let's talk a little bit about leadership development. I know that's an area you're focused on as well.
Yes.
So, from your experience, what type of priority should organizations place on training leaders from within?
Mhm.
And what can they do to foster this growth?
Oh, yes. So, you know, it goes back to scaling culture. Um, it's rare when you get to 500 people that the founding team or the leadership team, they can't interview everybody anymore.
Right.
They can't have one-on-ones with everyone anymore. And so, you know, what I've seen in my experience, not only at Dataiku, but in previous roles, is most organizations promote their best people, their best individual contributors, their best doers, and then just kind of fingers crossed hope that they can enjoy managing and do it successfully.
Yeah.
And then, most companies now invest in some sort of training, and then it kind of stops there. And what we're doing differently at Dataiku is we're trying to weave leadership development into the entire process. So right when I joined, we started with the executive team, and I said, we can't really hire or teach elements of leadership that you all don't embody and do yourselves. So we started with an assessment of the executive team to understand how are they perceived as leaders, and we drilled it down to a few key behaviors. Then we did an assessment of who are the leaders that you've promoted internally that have been successful and what's made them successful, and who are the leaders that we've brought in from outside who have been successful and what's made them successful. And so through that like 3-prong approach, we came to a list of what it actually means to be a leader at Dataiku. And we've built interview questions that assess those attributes. We've built an internally created management development program that works on fostering those behaviors and attributes. And we're weaving it into our performance management process now so that we actually have accountability on those metrics. And so I think even just holistically looking at leadership development, as it's not just about training, it's about the way that we hire, it's about the way we teach, and it's about the way we hold people accountable.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about the hiring and how that factors in and how that might have changed what might have seemed like a good hire previously versus now.
Well, it's interesting because it's really showing up in our internal promotion process. So we're actually taking a lot of time now as we look to hire people, promote people internally. We spend a lot of time talking about what it means to be a manager and what it means to be a leader at Dataiku, and not only what they'll gain, but what they have to lose as they take on this role. And so I think it's allowed us to just have deeper conversations with people about the reality of them being happy in this type of role, but also the resources that we're going to give them in order to help them be successful in the role. So that's changed it a bit internally and externally. I find when you're really clear about what you want and you have questions that are going to enable hiring managers to really deeply understand if they get that or not, it just simplifies it so much because we're not looking for the unicorn that has everything and has done everything. We're looking for 5 things that we think make the difference of a quintessential, just what every organization and leadership book says you should be, to what it means to be a leader at Dataiku.
One last question before we wrap up. As a company offering your own state-of-the-art data science platform, how does Dataiku think about using data and analytics to help improve the employee experience? You talked about a few examples, but any other areas where you think there's room to grow?
Yeah, we're just starting to build out this function, the people analytics function at the company, and it's fascinating. We're really starting with talent acquisition and utilizing. We have a candidate feedback form, that candidate survey that we're doing, that starts to assess not only are we giving candidates a great experience, but is that different by region? Are we moving too fast in some areas, too slow in another? How much time between steps in the acquisition process, how does that correlate to whether or not a job offer is extended and whether or not a job offer is accepted? And also even something as interesting as the reality of it's a super competitive landscape for talent right now. And we found a lot of correlation between the last step of the process, so the actual job offer, between the job offer and the acceptance and the start date. actually having like a pre-boarding period of time where we interact with the candidate. We invite the candidate to have dinner or drinks with their new team, and to like keep them warm actually significantly leads to them actually joining and starting versus rescinding their acceptance and starting somewhere else. So we've started to do a lot of analysis on the talent acquisition side, and now we're looking at like predictive analytics. So things like does frequency of manager changing lead to people leaving the organization? So having like hypotheses that as we scale, how important is stability and consistency in making sure that people stay engaged and happy. So we're in the beginning stages of it, and I think the first year of it is all about actually like figuring out what data you want to collect.
Right.
And so we're doing a lot of foundation work of what kind of data are we going to collect and why, and then we can start to glean insights from it.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. I mean, it must be great to not only be able to collect that data, but have the team all in-house that can actually slice and dice all that stuff, because that's literally what you do.
Exactly. And it really, I think powerful thing of scaling is a lot of times companies just think about recruiting when they're scaling, and we're really trying to think of the 2 R's of it, of recruiting and retention. And so how can we make sure that we're investing in the people we've already worked so hard to bring in, to keep them engaged, keep them challenged and motivated and growing, so that yes, we continue to bring talent in, but we also invest inwardly to the people we've brought in previously as well.
Well, Joy, thanks so much for joining the show. For those listening, what's the best way for them to learn more about what you're doing?
So I'm on LinkedIn, Joy Walters Sybesma. So definitely connect with me. You can also email me directly, joy.sybesma, Sybesma at Dataiku, Dataiku.com. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. I have a side hustle, people consulting business that I co-founded. And so I'm just passionate about the space and the innovation around chief people officers and the task at hand. So I love networking with people in this function and across the business, and look forward to meeting lots of the listeners.
Wonderful. Well, thanks again. I'd like to thank Joy Sybesma, Chief People Officer at Dataiku, for joining the show. To learn more about both customer and employee experience, I recommend you go to my website at gregkillstrom.com and make sure to check out my latest book, The Center of Experience. More information is available on my website or wherever the book is available, like Amazon. Thanks for listening to The Agile World with Greg Killstrom. See you next week. Thanks again for listening to the Agile World podcast, brought to you by Tech Systems. I'm your host, Greg Killstrom. You can learn more and get a copy of my latest book, The Center of Experience, from my website at theagile.world or on Amazon or other retailers. Until next week, stay agile.